everyone, Charlie Morgan here and welcome to Outbound Tenets. So in this video I'm going to be walking you through a couple of things to bear in mind when building outbound systems, some sort of principles or foundations or pieces of knowledge that you need to know to successfully do it. Now this video assumes you have already watched Acquisition Genesis, which is the core sort of foundations module of the entire Easy Grow program. I know it's a long one, but if you haven't watched that yet and if you haven't understood the principles we lay out in Acquisition Genesis, please go and watch it before trying to build any of these systems. I know that some of the videos are long, I know some of the ideas seem boring, but it's just so important, right? Nothing will move the needle more for you than Acquisition Genesis. So yeah, this is like a bit of a shorter video, just explaining some key bits of outbound. So yeah, no fancy intro required, let's just jump straight into it. So it's very simple. We're going to cover 13 tenets that make outbound systems work. I'm going to give you some warnings. I'm also going to tell you a couple of things you shouldn't do, the like sort of traps or mistakes that people tend to make. Okay, so once again, the warning: if you haven't watched Acquisition Genesis in full, go and watch it now. If you really want to build a successful outbound system, you need to understand those ideas. So please make sure you've watched it. So let's get into it. So the first one we've got is this main rule, rule 0, essentially. I can tell you now, basically, there's 5 things here. 5 key ideas, and then there's some other sort of smaller ideas that we're going to move into. But if you don't have these things, nothing's going to work, right? So if we boil acquisition or outbound acquisition down to sort of like 4 or 5 things, these are the main points we need to have, okay? It's kind of like when you're building a system around outbound or any other system, whether it's in business or life, you really want to ask yourself, like the Pareto principle, what are the small things that if I get right, move the needle by 80%. It's kind of like if you want to be healthy, right, you could go and buy like some weird advanced supplements in a special shop somewhere, or you could just sleep well, right? If you sleep well, if you eat well, if you exercise and you get, a good amount of sunlight and, stuff like that, then you're going to be pretty healthy, right? But you can go and get the fanciest supplement in the world, but if if you're sleeping like shit and you're eating crap all the time, the supplement isn't going to do anything for you, right? So you need to make sure you've got the core foundations laid in place first. And these are the main things that people just forget about. So let's get into it. So the first thing above everything, the main rule, number 1 rule, never forget, is consistency, right? Consistency, like I don't have to explain the word to you, right? But my point here is it is the first sort of factor that denotes failure. So if someone isn't performing with outbound, if someone's not getting results, the first thing I'll say is like, where's your metrics? Now send me the metrics. And the first thing I'm looking for if someone's not getting results in outbound is inconsistencies. So it's like, okay, well, you sent, you did stuff for like 2 weeks and then you didn't do it for 2 weeks and then you had a week off and then you came back for 3 weeks. Like consistency is the number 1 indicator of success. So never stop. It doesn't matter what happens or how you feel, come hell or high water, stay consistent with outbound. It is the only way to receive reward is just consistent action. All right. If you take consistency and you apply it with, if you're able to receive feedback and iteration and consistency, it's really all you need. So it's all about volume, right? This is a big one. So volume is honestly the main thing. So when building outreach systems, you should constantly be asking yourself, how can we double the volume? How can we 5x the volume? How can we 10x the volume, right? I'm telling you now that like the results that you get, like if you're sending 100 emails a day and you're booking 2 calls a day, right? Then if you send 500 emails a day, you're going to book 10 calls a day. It's very simple. Cold stuff like this, if you build the systems properly, the relationship between input and output is very linear, right? It's not like ads or inbound. It's very linear. So if you're wondering, like, how do I book 10 times a meeting? It's like, just send 10 times the volume. Or if you've got 2 cold callers and each cold caller is generating you 3 appointments a day each, then why don't you just hire 2 more? Just double your inputs. Bo and I realized this with Imperium recently. We were wondering how we get to 8 figures. We're sort of doing sort of like, 4 or 5 mil a year at the moment, like 400, 500K a month. And like, we were asking ourselves the question, like, well, how do we get to 8 figures? Like, how do we double that? And we were like, oh shit, just double the inputs. So we're literally going to hire double the reps and just book double the appointments. Right now we're scheduling like, 500, 600 calls a month, maybe 400, 500, 600. All we're going to do now is just focus on trying to book 1,000 appointments a month. How do we do that? We double the amount of reps we have. We double the amount of outputs or inputs we put into our systems. And then we get to 8 figures. It really is that simple once you've got a proven system. So volume, right? I see people doing like, 15 looms a day, or they make like 20 cold calls a day. It's like, do like 10 times that and then see what happens, right? So it's, by the way, I've got the squeaky chair. If you can hear me like sort of rustling about, I do apologize. But anyway, second point is it's all about follow-up. So follow-up is the next main thing. Cold and warm alike. So you'll find that most of your appointments book after 5 to 8 follow-ups on warm prospects, and most of your replies come on the second or third follow-up. So it's rarely always going to be that people book as soon as you contact them. It's going to take a lot of following up. So I know it's like pretty common knowledge, but this is the stuff that people forget. It's like, they get a reply from someone, or someone says they want to book a call, and then like the person's like, okay, here's a link, and then the person doesn't schedule and they follow up once and they leave it. You should commit to following up on warm prospects at least 8 times and cold prospects at least 3 times. If you're not doing that, you're going to be doing something wrong. It's also all about result, right? So result is the main thing. Never talk about the details of your service or product. Always talk about the end result. Focus on the solution, the future they want. Never get into the nitty gritty from an outbound perspective. So this is once again very simple, but like when you're building your messaging and all of your stimuli, focus entirely on what happens as a result of working with you, right? Don't focus on how you do what you do. Focus on the fact that you can, right? It's a big difference between like, oh yeah, I do Facebook ads and then we'll get your custom audiences and we'll build your pixel and then we're going to do, doesn't matter. People don't care about that, right? They might do on the sales call or something if they've got questions. But honestly, like just put the blinders on and just purely focus on telling people what happens as a result of working with you. If you focus on the result, everything else falls into place. It's also all about the offer. So the offer is one of the most asymmetrical leverage points. We've got the offer module in the Acquisition Genesis program. If you haven't watched that, please do. But offer is the next main thing. It's the biggest needle mover. Now, the best copy is a good offer. So when people are like, Charlie, like, what should my cold calling script be? Or what should I say on cold messaging? It's like, honestly, like, if you've got a bloody good offer and it's well thought through, that is your copy. And that will perform better than anything else that you could write. And you can improve your copy by 10 times and accomplish the same improvement as if you improved your offer 2 times. So like, let's say that you get your copywriting skills, you 10x your copywriting skills, and your copy is like 10 times better. It's like, that's great and everything, but if you just improved your offer by 0.5 times, you get the same result. So offer is very like leverageable, it's very asymmetric. If you're not getting results, the first thing that we're going to look at is consistency. The second thing we're going to look at is volume, right? Then we're going to look at the follow-ups, and then we're going to look at if you're focusing on the result. And if you're doing all of those things, then it's probably going to be down to the offer. So these are the 5 main things, right? Consistency, just basically doing it every single, like committing to a high volume every day and doing it every day and showing up every day and not missing a day. Because you might think, oh, I'll just do it tomorrow, but then tomorrow becomes the next day. And if there's gaps, there's going to be a problem. Volume, as high as you can possibly get it. And even then, like you limit yourself. Like people are like, yeah, I do 100 emails a day. And I'm like, why? They're like, I don't know, just like 100. It's like, why aren't you doing 300? I don't know. It's like, well, what would happen if you did 300? Well, we'd probably book 3 times the calls. So why aren't you doing it? I don't know. And then they're like, okay, shit. Like honestly, it's the simplest paradigm shift you can have. But yeah, it's literally every time that Bo and I level up to the next level in business, it's always just because we look at what we're doing and we're like, why don't we just double this? And then we realize that we limit ourselves by doubling it. It's like, why don't we triple it or why don't we quadruple it? Obviously, you're going to find there's limiting factors in the business that can bottleneck you elsewhere. But for acquisition, siloing this down and keeping it simple, it's volume. So follow up, are you following up consistently on people? Result and offer. So now that we've talked about those 5 things in brief, there's a few other points I want to run through. So POC versus scale. So POC stands basically for proof of concept. So the whole lesson here is you can only scale what is proven. So you can't really apply volume to something that doesn't work, right? So the point here is that results in outbound are very fractal. If you can't book any meetings, sending 200 emails or messages or calls, you're not going to book any meetings sending 200,000. So people in your niche, right, they have what we call affinity. And what that means is they're very similar to each other. Their underlying problems, like history, psychology, is very similar. They're obviously very different people, but as a niche, if you aggregate them and collect them, they're all quite similar. So if you reach out to 200 gym owners with a specific piece of copy and they all read it and nobody responds, you're going to find that if you send 200,000 emails, you're going to get the same sort of response. It's very fractal. If you have a 2.6% appointment booking rate after having sent 1,000 emails, you're probably going to stay within that range if you send 100,000, right? So all of the things that we put together are put together to basically create a proof of concept. The first rule of outbound is to establish a proof of concept. Once you have that, you can scale. So a proof of concept, it can be anything. It could be a KPI, but let's say, for example, that you figured out that you need to generate 10 meetings a day to get to your goal, right? It's like, well, how do we do that? Let's say that you've got like a 3% appointment booking rate on your emails or your cold messages. So if you send 100 of those a day, you're going to get 3 meetings a day. Pretty simple, right? You need to get 10, so why don't we just send 350 a day, right? And then you can sort of start to realize like, okay, but you can't really scale something that isn't proven. You can scale it, but it doesn't mean it'll be successful. So quality, this is a little idea that I came up with. It's very easy to polarize yourself basically towards either sending high volume, low quality, or low volume, high quality. So there's 2 types of people when it comes to acquisition, and they're both bloody stupid in my eyes. The first person is someone who sends thousands of things every day, or they just do ridiculous volume, but they put no thought or time or effort into what they're actually doing for the people they're reaching out to. That's the first category of person. They just go for quantity, right? And they're right in the regard that quantity is required. But then we have the other type of person who spends 25 minutes or 10 minutes or 50 minutes recording a bloody loom or doing an audit for someone, and then only sending like 5 of those every day. Both of those people are wrong, right? If you want to be right, you want to sit in the middle and do what we call quality. We're going to show you how to do this in the program, but essentially we're combining quality and quantity. We're taking like personalization and effort and marrying that with high volume. If you marry those 2 things together, it's a recipe for just absolute destruction. This is a big one, right? And I'm going to sort of rant shortly about this. Outsourced desperation. So I want you to listen here because this is really, really important. So outbound is painful, but you should not be desperate to outsource it. VAs and setters are attractive because they alleviate pain, but this is not a reason to hire. No one will care about it and do it like you. So unless you're booking consistent calls, do it yourself. So if you're watching this, you fall into, there's a couple of categories of clients we have, right? If you are making over 6 figures and you've got a consistent flow of appointments, right? Then you can outsource outbound pretty much off the rip. If you are making less than $10,000 a month, or whatever that sort of number looks like for you, if you haven't got a consistent flow of appointments and appointment booking is the biggest problem for you right now, outbound is going to be your first port of call, because inbound takes a long time to kick off and ads requires a lot of capital. So if you're not making a huge amount of money, right, and you haven't, you can't wait, 6 months for something to kick off, you've only really got the option of doing outbound, right? What that means is outbound is your ticket to your goal. You have a goal, you have a dream, right? You know what you want, you know exactly what you want your life to look like, or if you've been through the mindset module, you'll know that. But ultimately, you want to make money because you want to solve a problem so that you can have a lot of money and you can live a life you want to live. That could be financial freedom, it could be a car, whatever. So you have to get the outbound thing right, okay? So if booking appointments is the biggest problem for you right now, and you only really have the option of using outbound to do it and solve the problem immediately, why on earth would you outsource that to a virtual assistant in the Philippines for $3 an hour? If it's like, I know it sucks. I know outbound is painful. I know it requires work. I know it requires consistency. I know you don't like it. Nobody likes doing cold emails. Nobody likes doing cold calls. Nobody likes doing cold messaging. My mentor used to say, show me someone who likes cold calling and I'll show you a psychopath, right? But the point here is that it's your business. It's your entire life, right? If you get this thing right and you solve this problem, then you're going to have your dreams coming true, your business dreams coming true. So I can't stress enough that you should do the work. Now, caveat, if you're making like 20 grand a month and you've got 15 clients and you're doing service delivery for a bunch of people, you've got a small team to manage and you've got some sales calls coming in and you have to do, that's fine. Then it makes sense to outsource it, right? And we're going to show you how to hire setters and VAs and give all the SOPs and stuff. So it's going to be very tempting. But if you're not making a huge amount of money and you've got an abundance of time, you must do it yourself. In business, there's 3 things that we're going to focus on, right? Getting appointments, booking appointments, closing deals from the appointments, and servicing clients from the closed deals. If you're not doing one of those 3 things, you're wasting your time. So if you think like, yep, I'm just going to hire a VA to do the looms and I'm going to hire a setter to do the messages, and then I'm going to go and build a website whilst they do the work. Wrong, idiot, right? Don't think like that. I'm not calling you an idiot specifically, but what I'm trying to say is that do not be desperate to outsource outbound attraction, because it is your ticket and your key to your goal. And it's going to support you until your inbound systems start to kick in, and it's going to give you enough cash to start running ads. You don't have to do outbound forever, right? All you really have to do is do it consistently the right way for 6 to 12 to 18 months, and then your inbound systems will take off and you've got money to run ads, and then you're done. Then you're out, right? But it's really important you realize this, because the amount of people that have this sort of entitlement stroke ego, like, oh, I'm above cold email, or I'm not going to make cold calls or cold messaging, like, no, I haven't got time for that. Look at yourself and your situation and ask yourself, what could I possibly do in my business? What could I be doing in my business that is more important than generating appointments right now? Like what? If you've got 10 clients and you're servicing them all, fair enough. If you've got like 6 sales calls coming in a day and you're doing them all, fair enough. Then you've actually got a reason to not do outbound. But if you haven't got a huge amount of clients and if you haven't got a huge amount of sales calls, every single hour in your day should be going to outbound attraction and building content for your inbound systems. Okay? So I just wanted to just sort of rant there, but it's so important because, you know, the amount of people that have fallen prey to this, clients we've signed who are making like, you know, a couple of grand a month, they don't want to do the outbound, so they hire a virtual assistant to do it. The virtual assistant, like, who's going to be more motivated to get it right? You, the business owner, who has the direct interest of solving the problem so you can achieve the dream life you want, or a virtual assistant receiving $3 an hour in the Philippines? Who's more motivated to actually solve the problem? Pretty straightforward. So don't make the mistake. It's a very easy mistake to make. So basically everyone that like off the rip doesn't give it any thought and just like sort of wings it and gives it to a VA doesn't work. It doesn't work unless, of course, they are a successful business owner already and they've already done plenty of sales calls and they've got a lot of clients, then it's fine. So that's that. So the other rant is your spin, thinking versus copying. So people that blindly copy and paste our stuff will struggle. Now there's a caveat to this, right? You can take our scripts and all of our templates and stuff and copy and paste them directly and they'll probably work fine. But here's the thing, you need to behave as if everybody's going to do that. Because a lot of people will. And if everybody's copying and pasting and doing the exact same thing, then it's not going to work, right? So I know that everybody in this program is not going to copy and paste our stuff because I've told you not to, right? And it genuinely is within your best interest to tweak it. So you must add your own spin to everything we teach, even if it's just tweaking it a tiny bit. Do not monkey see, monkey do, right? You're a human being with billions of neurons and a brain. You are not a monkey. So use your brain and your neurons to tweak things. You can use our scripts as models and frameworks, but just don't blindly copy and paste, right? So like basically what I'm saying here is like, by all means, take one of our scripts and 90% of it, you can keep the same, but just slightly vary it, just create a little bit of a variation there. You know, where we use one adjective, you might use another adjective. Where we use one call to action in a certain way, you use another. Just don't obviously go ahead and like change everything because then it kind of defeats the object. But when I give you a cold email template or when I give you a cold calling script, I know it works, but I want you to start to make it your own, because then when it becomes your own, nobody else can copy that and you have an advantage. So yeah, that's just a quick point I wanted to sort of make. So vagueness is a big one. So what you need to understand is that curiosity is one of the driving forces of human behavior. So you want to keep your outbound messaging vague and never overshare details of anything like pricing. If you have pricing on your website, get rid of it. If you have pages on your website dedicated to explaining your products, get rid of them, right? The reason we want to do this is because a lot of people are going to schedule calls with you. There's really two reasons people schedule calls, and usually they're sort of working in tandem. The first reason is incentive, right? You can give them something they want. The second reason is curiosity, right? They're curious to know how you can get them what they want. So if you tell them everything they need to know about your product and how it works and the pricing, 50% of their motivation to book a call is immediately gone. And honestly, like, I can't tell you how important this is. So people schedule to learn about your offer and your product. If you tell them everything, they're going to have less reason to schedule. Less is more. So, you know, if someone replies to you saying, oh, like, I've got a bunch of questions, it's like, let's book a call and we'll discuss them on the call. It's like, you know, people aren't entitled to just knowing everything about your product. So you want to keep it vague. You want to keep it sort of open to interpretation. The 10th one is outreach lag. So this is a big one. In outbound, the work you do today is the result you get in 2 to 4 weeks. There is a lag between sending messages, emails, and calls and booking calls. So we know this, Bo and I have lived this plenty of times. If like, it's the same with any system basically. There's sort of some latency between the input and the output basically, which means there's a delay. So if I email someone today, right, I might have to follow up on them twice, you know, in order for them to actually book a call with me or in order for them to reply. So that's like 4 or 5 days I've got to wait to get a reply with the follow-ups. And then if they want to book a call, they say, yep, send me a calendar link. I send the calendar link, they don't book. I follow up once, twice, 3. I might follow up on them like 4 times before they actually book. Over the course of those 4 times, it's going to take typically like 6 to 8 days, which means that it's going to actually take like 11 or 12 days for them to schedule. And like it can take even longer than that sometimes. So just bear in mind that like if you want to know the true effectiveness of an outbound system or a set of variables you've created, you need to be consistent for at least 2 weeks and follow the entire process for 2 weeks. People basically make the mistake of like, they'll send like 30 cold emails like today, and then they'll do like another 20 tomorrow, and they'll get like no responses, and then they get all emotional and start panicking, and then they change everything, and then they go like, you need to become scientific and methodical and logical and emotionless in your approach. So when you commit to a set of variables, commit to testing them for a high enough volume for a long enough period of time, so you allow for any latency to elapse before you actually make any conclusions about the variables that you've selected, right? So it's just a really common thing that happens to people where they're very emotional, they write some copy, they think it's going to work. 3 days later, they've got no appointments after sending like 50 emails or whatever, or 20 messages. So then they change it. And then they go again, and then they change it again. And then they go again and change it again. And it still doesn't work, so they change it again. And then before you know it, over the course of like 2 or 3 weeks, they've changed like 6 or 7 variables or 8 variables in their entire process. And then they've changed their profile, then they've changed their offer, then they've changed their pricing. So you just need to select variables and then just run them and then slowly tweak. The slower you make changes, the better, essentially. So doubt conditioning, this is another big one. This is one that I learned really early on when I was building Imperium. So I basically built Northflow to 100 grand a month, cash collected, and then we started Imperium. And I was always, I knew what I was doing with outbound attraction. Like I knew I was a bloody demon at sales calls and outbound attraction, but I still had all of this doubt and fear about Imperium when we started. So I basically conditioned doubt and fear out of my mind. And the way you do this is basically whenever you have a thought or a feeling like this isn't going to work, or I bet this will get no replies, like, or anything similar to that, you need to open your phone or email or tablet or whatever and basically do more outreach. So every time you have a negative thought or a negative wave of emotion comes over you in any way, shape or form related to outbound attraction, you must immediately respond to that emotion with more action and more outreach. It's the only way to overcome the fear. If you meet doubt and fear head on with action, even if it's 3 a.m., then you're going to be fine. And like, you know, I actually did this, like sometimes I'd wake up at like 4 in the morning and be like, fuck, I bet I'm going to wake up to like no responses. And I just pull my phone up. I'd open Facebook because I used to obviously have it on my phone when I was doing outreach. I'd send friend requests to like 3 people and then send them all like voice notes. And it was just, and then I just go back to sleep. And then I'd wake up in the morning and then maybe one person replied and I was like, okay, it's like outbound will work if you do it. But you don't, like, if the more doubt and fear you have, the less likely you are to do it. So if you have a thought that's a doubt or a bit of fear, if you just leave it, it will just fester, and it will just grow and grow and grow and grow like a cancer in your mind, essentially. It's emotional cancer, until all you feel is crippling fear and doubt, and then you won't do any of the outreach because it's painful to do, because it requires rejection, it requires consistency, some boredom, some monotony, right? So just remember, every time a doubt or some fear comes up, if that's not quashed immediately with action, if you don't chop the head off with a bunch of action immediately, it's just going to grow and grow and grow until you can't do anymore. Because the only reason outbound won't work is if you don't do enough volume. And the reason you won't do enough volume is because you won't do the work. And the reason you won't do the work is because you're doubtful it's going to work. So that's basically why. And then we have the lead quality paradox, finally. So reach out and schedule everyone, regardless of how qualified they seem. So this is a big lesson, right? If you're not generating a large quantity of appointments, if you haven't got a lot of appointments coming in, just talk to everyone. You might be like, oh yeah, but looking at his Facebook profile, he probably can't afford it. You don't know, A, how much money he has, right, or she has. You don't know who that person has a contact with who could give them money. You don't know if they have any friends or family members that could also buy from you. Right, family is unlikely, but they might have contacts in your niche they could buy from. You don't know how successful they're going to become in the next 3 or 4 months, and they could become a client. So I don't want to use the phrase beggars can't be choosers, because I don't want to call you a beggar. But like, if you're not generating like 4 or 5 calls a day, just talk to everyone. The worst case scenario is you spend an hour practicing your sales. Like, there's no real downside of talking to unqualified prospects. The only time it becomes a downside is when somebody else could have scheduled and taken that slot because you haven't got enough availability. So we now qualify people with financial qualifiers, but we only started doing that once we started hitting multi-7 figures. When I was doing sales calls for Imperium, I took every single sales call, regardless of the quality, for basically like a year. Then I learned that every time I talked to someone from India, Bangladesh or Pakistan, they didn't have the money to buy. I did 50 calls with those people, 40, 50 calls, and then I learned that the conversion rate on those calls was 0%. So then I started taking, I would deny those calls. I obviously have nothing against people from those countries in any way, shape or form, but my point is that I learned through non-assumptive judgment that they weren't going to be a fit for us, so now we reject them, right? But I wouldn't have done it without doing that. So that's everything, right? The main one here is outsourced desperation. There's obviously quite a few, you need to make sure you know them all. But like, I want to reiterate this again. Bo and I Bo did all of the lead sourcing for our looms, and I sent all of the looms personally for basically the first 6 months of Imperium. We were doing like 50k a month and I was still doing looms. We had like 100 clients in the program, and Bo would still get up and like lead source through Facebook groups like 40 leads a day, and I would still send all the looms. So like, and then eventually we outsourced it because we started getting too many clients and sales calls. But just remember that. So that's everything for Outbound Tenets. I just sort of blitzed through everything quickly because I know you're keen to build these systems. But just bear these things in mind, all right? It's so important. If you get like, you know, 2 months into the systems and they stop working, come back to this and ask yourself, like, have I been consistent? Am I sending a high volume? Am I being diligent with follow-ups? Am I talking about the end result? Do I have a really solid offer, right? Have I established proof of concept before trying to scale? Am I sending quality, right? Have I outsourced it desperately because I don't want to face the pain? Have I just blindly copy and pasted, or have I given it a spin? Am I being vague in my approach to some degree, enough to build curiosity? Am I allowing for latency and lag? Am I getting rid of the doubts and fears by doing immediate like outreach? And am I being too picky with who I talk to? These are the main things and the questions you need to ask yourself when building outbound systems. So that's everything. So I hope this one's been helpful for you. This is, you know, I wish I knew this when I started building outbound systems, but I had to unfortunately learn the hard way. And in reflection, this is what I wish I knew. So that's everything for Outbound Tenets. I hope you found it useful, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.